Well, power to the people.
Fuck you.
The world is on fire. Let's not be around the bush. It genuinely just is. There's the pandemic, corporate greed, innocent black lives, riots. The world is on fire, and people have been really pushing me to talk about it. Black Lives Matter has honestly been around for a while now, but I've never really seen it reach this level of prominence. Basically since its inception, if you want me to keep it real. The white man really just chose a bad time. I've been getting increasingly frustrated for some obvious and more subtle reasons, but it's finally driven me to make this video. Let's get into it. We're in a very interesting time right now. Not necessarily because of the pandemic or 2020 in general, but because of the police. They're killing black people again. And remember, it's only real when white people notice it. Alright, so the first thing we need to establish is why this growing animosity between the black community and the state is happening. Racial tension has always been building between these groups, the moment the pandemic began to raise in prominence. A huge factor into this was the fact that there was a disproportionate amount of black people dying from coronavirus as opposed to white people. Due to years of systematic racism, a majority of black people disproportionately make up the workforce that doesn't have the leisure to work from home. It's got a lot to do with the unaddressed structural issues pertaining to racial inequality. When white people catch a cold, black people just... we just die. Another factor to consider is the fact that an overwhelming majority of states and counties chose to increase police freedoms during the virus in order to get people to stop associating in large groups. I'll get into my thoughts on this in a second, but this whole thought process of increasing police numbers and freedoms to harass people as a means to getting them to obey the law has always been one I've contended with. Once again, systematic racism present in the system which targets black and brown people is only perpetuated when police are given more power and leisurely freedom. But giving police power has always been done with the idea and the purpose that the police are supposed to keep the citizens in line. This specifically pertains to the UK too, as this was even before coronavirus, but I distinctly remember a new security advisor putting out a statement saying, "I want would-be criminals to feel terror." I don't think this is exclusive either. This is quite a general mindset. I'm pretty sure Trump threatened to bust out the military on protesters who loot. Understanding is never an option. It's always a matter of control. How do you control? Force and fear. It's been said before, but I'll say it. Fear will never make a lasting peace. You can take one look at the state of race and religion in this world, and it's as clear as day. I think black people are a testament to the fact that you can't use fear to control people. But this is equally as important to bear in mind, as there's protests for this exact purpose. Some mild anarchy going on because of, the killing of George Floyd. There's things I really like about it, and there's things that I think there's things that could stand to be more organized. But honestly and truly, nothing is really getting under my skin more than two things. This misguided sense of loyalty to the establishment, and the sheer amount of black tokenism I've been seeing recently. It's dumb. And there's people out there ready to say, don't destroy your community.
Yeah, we need to burn this place down.
I used to run with a clan that was militant. Preparing for war, we studied strategies with diligence. The revolution was our real intent. We had to put our theory to work so we could find out what it really meant.
I'm gonna start by stating this. Do I believe every single black person out there is rioting and protesting, thinking of the disproportionate amount of deaths from black people from coronavirus and the government exploitation during the pandemic, or even general working class oppression? Nah, I'm not. And to a degree, that's part of the problem. This protesting is about black lives, and it's specifically being driven by a desire to see George Floyd's assassinators be brought to justice. I think Cornel West had an incredible, just incredible talk about this on CNN.
It is a lynching at the highest level. Nobody can deny it. And I thank God that we have people in the streets. Can you imagine this kind of lynching taking place and people are indifferent? People don't care? People are callous? You have just a few people out there because the Black Lives Matter movement emerged under a black president, black attorney general, and black Homeland Security, and they couldn't deliver, you see? So that when you talk about the masses of black people, the precious poor and working class black people, poor and working class brown, red, yellow, whatever color, they're the ones who are left out, and they feel so thoroughly powerless, helpless, hopeless, then you get rebellion.
I do have criticisms of the riots and the protests, but I should make something immediately clear. I'm not opposed to riots or protesting. Hell, I'm not opposed to violent protesting. It's damn near necessary if you were to ask me. It's why when I hear statements from Killer Mike saying
that if you sit in your homes tonight, instead of burning your home to the ground, you will have time to properly plot, plan, strategize, and organize and mobilize in an effective way. And two of the most effective ways is first taking your butt to the computer and making sure you fill out your census so that people know who you are and where you are. The next thing is making sure you exercise your political bully power and going to local elections.
I won't lie, I'm raising a bit of an eyebrow. I'll start with this concept of loyalty. The loyalty people have to the establishment, but also honestly just with black people. We'll start with the former. There seems to be this big issue with this concept of black people breaking things. It's very interesting. There's a large subset of white people watching black people break things who really don't like it. It's weird. It's almost weird. They seem more bothered by black people breaking things than they do the black man getting killed. It's very interesting set of priorities. People tend to defend the police on the premise that they're just doing their job. There must be good police people. They're not injected with the racist gene every time they put on their badge. It's not that simple. The people behind the police force generally tend to believe what they're doing is right. I'd assume anyway, for that line of work, you'd have to. The argument tends to be something along the lines of, hey, not all cops are bad people, they just want to protect people. Yeah, sure, whatever. But it'll never change the fact that the police serve the state, not the people. If I invade your house and you call the police, they'll take me away. If America invades Iran and you call the police...
Gun? What gun? I'm not holding gun. Wait! I think I can see the gun now!
Yeah, that's right. What gun? They serve the state. You don't touch your master. They'll punk you out and there's nothing you can do about it.
You think Dick Cheney's worried about you? Dick Cheney's like, yeah, I'm a crook, so what? What you gonna do? Nothing. They will come and they will look at you, they will punk you, and you will like it. And you do, and you go, yes, I love the president. Yeah, you like it.
And fine, you stubborn, they'll get someone else. That's genuinely how it works. I agree that the generalization that everybody who puts on a police uniform is racist and violent is very out there, but that's really not what the protests are about. The opposition to the police is symbolic to the opposition to the state, and how even in times of crisis, the system still finds new ways to kill black people. It's important to keep that in mind.
I hated this place. I wished that it would go away. But it's useless. Even if it burns down, the wreckage and ash are still there.
Moments like this are very telling of where our loyalties stand. Again, I find it increasingly interesting, to say the least, that white people are more concerned with the damage caused by the protests than the reason they're actually happening. The reason people are on the streets, the reason there's animosity to the police, the reason people are mad about black people getting killed.
The reason I'm in here.
And I don't think anything exudes overwhelming privilege more. Like, wow, you could just not care about that. You have the leisure of seeing a black guy get killed by the police, and you could go, hey man, that ain't got nothing to do with me. Look at this on my timeline. Like, it's almost interesting. You can genuinely just not care. And I genuinely do think that's more egregious than All Lives Matter, because while it's dumb, it's the choice you have to not even involve yourself with it that's just really dripping with privilege. Not my problem. Think about all the Iranians that are suffering because the US has bases outside threatening to close in, like Azula and Ba Sing Se. Think about the people in Venezuela dying and suffering because of the sanctions from the US. Unsurprisingly, because Venezuela has a lot of oil and America has a white savior complex. And you out here upset because the convenience of Target is gone. Rioting has always historically had strong roots in activism. Martin Luther King Jr., smart guy, he said this: a riot is the language of the unheard. There's often an exoticized depiction of Martin Luther King Jr. that paints him as a pacifist dreamer, but he wasn't cowardly, and outside what institutional racism from academics have taught you, I would just argue that he was a strategist, and we'll get into that later. It's also not uncommon for people to be critical of protests and riots in spite of this, primarily because it's perceived as too violent. There's a lot I can say here, but I'll try to start with the basics. If there were no protests, nothing would have happened. There's no greater proof of that than what's going down right now. It took 4 days to actually arrest the killer, and before that, they were lined up outside this guy's house, protecting him. Like, I don't know, bad example, if I kill Bill Gates, would I get an army of police backing me for 4 days? I don't think I would. There's a huge difference between breaking the law for one's own individual self-interest and violating it in the interest of a class or people whose oppression is expressed either directly or indirectly through that particular law. These are the words of Angela Davis, but to put it simply, think about the difference between Huey and Riley. Riley who commits crimes for the sake of self-interest, and Huey who commits crimes for the sake of socio-political change. I brought Martin Luther King before because there seems to be this tired liberal rhetoric surrounding him that he was nothing more than a dreamer. Not only serving to do a disservice to his legacy, but in creating a generation of black youth who idealize a version of Dr. King who was very docile and non-combative, you can systematically create a generation of black youth uneducated about their history, making it much more unlikely that they'll ever rebel against it. It's conditioning. This video isn't about institutional racism, but I have spoken about similar things in the past. 2. The very nation we stand on was built on violence. It goes without saying the suffering of Native Americans, but there's also things like segregation, how the government would give the KKK and all these groups awareness on peaceful protests like the Freedom Riders, just so they could harass and beat the shit out of them. The Wretched of the Earth is a good read and it details this very well. If the very foundation of the nation we stand was built on violence and oppression, then why should we have any respect for it? Why are we so conditioned to which we're willing to defend criminals if they're the ones who made the rules? The liberal articulates his sensitiveness to certain of society's intolerable details, but will almost never prescribe methods of resistance which exceed the limits of legality. Redress through the electoral channels is the liberal's panacea. Oh damn, I punched that thing. Okay, cool. In the heat of our pursuit for fundamental human rights, black people have been continually cautioned to be patient. We are advised that as long as we remain faithful to the existing order, the glorious moment will arrive when we come into our own fully fledged humans. In resisting, we sometimes become openly compelled to violate the laws which betrays our oppression. But even containing our resistance within the orbit of legality, we have been labelled as criminals, and have been methodically persecuted by a racist legal apparatus. Like, that's so weird to me. You can exist in a world run by criminals, yet the only criminals you're able to identify are the ones systematically sold to you. This is even being done now. The media's portrayal of black people is no new topic. I bring up the war on drugs in almost every video, but it honestly sticks out so much to me because it's so meticulous and specific. The protests are being made out as violent. Trump is tweeting about them being thugs. The language they use. Cat Williams, great comedian, he has a great bit about this.
Niggas be at the house, I don't even know no motherfucking insurgents.
They know if you dehumanize these people with your language, then the public won't care. Trump knows damn well that an overwhelming majority of the people protesting are black people, and he calls them thugs for being mad about the killing of a black person, and then proceeds to threaten military action. We know their strategies. We've seen them do and say things like this before. Don't buy it. You live in a country where your president's first instinct after the unjust killing of a black man is to shoot the people mad about it. I mean, you tell me, where does your loyalty stand? You out here capping for millionaires, and you broke. you ain't even rich, and like you're talking about these million. You're broke.
The streets have to be safe.
Safe for who? You're here to protect property, not lives.
You know, it wasn't long ago that because of the pandemic, people were arguing, hey, some people might just have to die. We can't afford for that company to lose some money. And these are the same people you want to put your faith in. Trust me, I have criticisms of the protests and the riots, but I'm not for a second gonna side with the nation that prioritizes profit over people in the face of imminent danger. My moral compass hasn't been systematically defined, and neither should anyone's. Do you know what it means to be institutionalized? It means your entire perception of reality has been framed around something you're used to. I'm willing to bet back in the days of overt slavery and civil rights, in between all the meetings and riots, there was this one guy that like, hey man, you see the problem? Just gotta figure out the system, work hard, vote, get close to master, and...
Hey Tom, shut the fuck up!
After 400 years of racism, there are some black people, not all the slaves ran when they said, okay, you're free. But some of them stayed on the plantation. A significant number of them.
I'm not here to sugarcoat it. I have no respect for systematics that oppress me. Alright, so here's a really dumb example, and people are gonna hate me for this, but it really just came to mind. Okay, so you know Danganronpa. Danganronpa is a killing game with 15 students. You're trapped, and if you kill someone, you're allowed to leave. You can either A, participate in this fucked up system, or B, don't participate in it. And in the end, that's always what happens. Now that's a dumb, nerdy example, but it's to put into perspective the ridiculousness of asking people to go back into participating into a system that doesn't help them. Because if we truly believe the system is built on hierarchy, white supremacy, patriarchy, xenophobia, whatever, then why do we give it the respect we do? Simple, we've been institutionalized. But there's always still that guy going, hey man, we just need to be smart. This senseless violence has gone on too long. Get to the polls and vote. I really wanted to stay calm and balanced, but if this is you, you're part of the problem. See, what I really don't understand is, what's the argument here? I'm not arguing that internal systematic change is impossible. I'm all for strategy. But Huey P. Newton was clever and abused the law to his advantage and changed shit for guns really quickly. There's no denying that. But guess what? They were still targeted, killed, and attacked. So what's your point? Niggas been voting, or at least trying, for decades now. Guess what? Still targeted, killed, and attacked. What's your point? We're just not doing it right? It's genuinely no different than the Shamik Moore arrogance of, hey man, you see the problem? You're just not doing it right. You're not playing to the system well enough. See the way I carry myself, I can never be short. Big man like me, no. Like, let's not address the issue. Let's just find ways to manage it. Like these reformist compromises that do nothing but compromise the movements and kill any semblance of chance people had for getting change. At this juncture, the movement can either go in the direction of revolutionary social change or limit itself to winning reforms and democratic rights within the structure of capitalism. The potential is there for either. In fact, the weakness of the 1960s civil rights movement was that it allied itself with liberals in the Democratic Party and settled for civil rights protective legislation instead of pushing for social revolution. There's countless times where movements have been infiltrated directly and indirectly, and it's all driven by a connected desire to get you back to the status quo as soon as possible. There's never a right time to protest injustice. Never forget that.
I understand you need your job, but you're still a human being with dignity.
Yeah, I mean, look at this uniform, man. I look like a fucking dork. Why would they make me dress like this? What did I do to them, huh?
You should take action.
What can I do?
Have you ever thought about forming a union?
What's a union?
I heard something very interesting about white supremacy, and it got me thinking. If we got rid of every white person right now, there would still be white supremacy. Internalized bigotry and self-hate going unchecked would result in the same problems. This is because people lack the political education to recognize these as parts of the system, making us liable to repeating mistakes. What infuriates me isn't that people are subservient to this nation to the degree that their entire moral compass is shaped by the law. It's that the same nation will feed you a narrative of non-violence based on ownership. Organization was hammered by Killer Mike in a speech, and while I'm not particularly sure we agree on the means of organization, I think it's an important aspect we're missing here in terms of the protests, or at least, from what I've seen. Historically, the government has a very strong fear of coalitions. If you read the actual COINTELPRO plan against the Black Panthers, you know their biggest fear was a coalition. A great example was FDR. He signed the New Deal for workers. Alright, cool. But the only reason he did it was because there was a coalition of workers that showed up and said, you're gonna give us this, or we're just gonna take back everything. FDR didn't care about black people's rights. He didn't care about Japanese citizens. Man, this guy let J. Edgar Hoover put activists in jail. He didn't care. His only concern was preserving capitalism. Legit, that's the only reason. Needless to say, when Fred Hampton started the Rainbow Coalition, it raised some eyebrows. But before I go on, I want to address the ever-lingering shadow of Killer Mike's black nationalist politics bleeding into what he states we as a community are destroying. Our homes. Black ownership is something that's had its roots dating back to Marvin Gaye. I'm dumb. Okay, so I'm in the middle of editing and the video's going up today and I just realized this now. So yeah, I said Marvin Gaye instead of Marcus Garvey, and I'm just deep in it now, and yeah, I'm dumb. So instead, I was gonna play some no name, but I guess Marcus Garvey's the move now. Okay. Perhaps even before that, I'd argue it goes back to this old white baggage of Africans sold each other into slavery too. Which, while that claim is a ridiculous shift in blame which ignores several people who refused and were punished, it's more important because it gave birth to what I believe to be black tokenism. Black tokenism is the existence of a black person in a particular space for no other reason than giving the illusion of a non-racist space, creating the illusion of opportunity. And I don't see how black people are somehow supposed to accomplish what even white people weren't able to do with capital, but that's besides the point. It's also used to justify things. I'm sure we've all seen the black N-word pass stuff, but I think it's way more than that. Think black on black crime and how that excuse is used. This bad thing is okay because black people have done this bad thing too, and that's good. It's a very interesting narrative because it directly implies, and dare I say states, that suffering is okay if it's done in blackface. And no one to me makes this more clear than Obama. Nuance is the word of the day. In a world where Trump is so overtly a problem, Obama is seen as this godsend when he really isn't. Obama did so much fucked up shit. Drone strikes, killing children, invading countries, deportations. You know how many... disproportionately pulling black people in prisons, military industrial complex, spread imperialism, kill people with a nice happy black face. That is, in essence, what Obama is. Obama is the personification of a black face serving as a puppet for the administration. Where does your moral compass start and end when it comes to Obama? Look, Obama helped escape the economic crisis. But so? He still killed people. He's still a war criminal. The same way I'm mad about Trump invading Iran, it's the same energy I'm giving to Obama invading Libya. It's the same excuse. Hey, we're trying to save you, fully knowing their motives. Aaron was very critical of Obama's incoming presidency because of this, and parodies a lot of what he said and did. A big one being his response to holding the administration accountable for torture.
Granddad, this isn't the time for pointing fingers, right? President Obama says we can't move forward looking backward.
Will you appoint a special prosecutor, ideally Patrick Fitzgerald, to independently investigate the gravest crimes of the Bush administration, including torture and warrantless wiretapping?
I don't believe that anybody is above the law. On the other hand, I also have a belief that we need to look forward as opposed to looking backwards.
This doesn't mean anything. Like, this is just Riley saying, let's not address it, let's ignore our gruesome history and keep moving forward. And these talking points are essential for framing what is essentially one of the biggest shows of tokenism in black history, the very existence of Obama. It's to see ourselves in the same oppressive positions that we criticize and view them as something great. It's the comfortability factor that Cornel West spoke about. Black people in high positions of power, growing so accustomed to it that we almost forget why we're fighting it in the first place. And the existence of black people in high spaces within a capitalist society has made certain members of our community more passive and systematic in our approach. I'm not against systematic change, but historically, it's always been used as a means to return people back to the status quo. And nothing exudes this more than the various corporate accounts tweeting about Black Lives Matter. Why is Pokemon tweeting about Black Lives Matter? Look, I like Pokemon more than the average person, but this is ridiculous. 100k from the biggest media franchise of all time. Okay, this feeds into the final thing pulling all these riots and protests together. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is one of the more interesting movements in recent time because it's entirely a product of the digital age we currently live in. The general gist of Black Lives Matter is supposed to bring attention to police brutality and the importance of black lives. You might notice a bit of Black Lives Matter is cool, in principle. It feels like a strategic modern application of spreading awareness on these issues. Black Panthers were targeted as an organization, whereas you can't really target a hashtag. But in the same breath, I have a number of issues with Black Lives Matter, some of which conceptually, and some of which in execution. For starters, a movement can't hinge on a hashtag. As genius as this idea seems, due to the nature of how hashtags work and the nature of trends, it can very easily backfire, because trends come and go. Something could be trending for an hour, and then it's just gone. And while Black Lives Matter have remained relevant for a week or so, it's dwindling down. Like, for instance, you can shadow ban tweets and censor hashtags. In fact, they've already done it. Now what? What movement? The closest thing we have to organization is people going, hey, don't show your face on the hashtag. And not everyone's gonna know because not everyone's gonna see your tweet. Everyone's timeline is different, so people are seeing an amalgamation of different things which exhibit different responses. But most importantly, not everybody has the political education to understand what they're fighting for, how they plan, and how they tackle these issues. I'm pretty sure there were some black people attacking black trans women at the protests. And once again, a big reason for that is a lack of political education, organization, and a clear ideology. We're all saying Black Lives Matter, but in the grand scheme of things, what does that mean? What are we advocating for? Some people say defund the police. Some people are saying abolish the police. You know, like me. Some people are saying none of this and going, hey, just hold the cops accountable. All on the side of Black Lives Matter. 3 radically different perspectives on what to do with the police. Is Black Lives Matter about prison reform? Is it about abolishing the 13th Amendment? We don't know. I saw some shit, you know, it's important I bring this up. I saw some shit, nearly 1 million people donated. It might be 1 million right now. UK Black Lives Matter. You know what it says? Black Lives Matter UK is a coalition of black activists and organisers across the UK. We've been organising since 2016 for justice in communities. We are guided by a commitment to dismantle imperialism, capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, the state of structures that disproportionately harm black people in Britain around the world. Like, do you see what I mean? This shit is different. Look, I'm gonna keep it real. I like all of this. I like all this energy. But do I think every black person out there protesting is thinking about this? No. Because if they were, you wouldn't have people harassing trans women. You wouldn't have the sexism. You wouldn't have the bigotry. Because the ideology would be clear. Case in point, Black Lives Matter, for all of its strength and modern application, can never truly thrive as anything but a trend if it continues to remain reactionary and unorganized. When the police go out and they do the nefarious things they do, and they stop these protests, not only do they come in with a strategy, plan of escape, whatever, but they know everyone in uniform has the same ideology. There's a clear mission. It's about being strategic. If we're all in jail because we headed into a violent protest, then we're not really helping the community. We're just lining up to be registered into the system. I am not, repeat, absolutely not saying these riots or protests should end. Nah, I like them. And if this video hasn't made it clear, I think they're an essential element in sparking change, both rooted historically and, well, it's just changing. The purpose of this video is to re-establish the importance of black solidarity in the face of oppression. Oppression and discrimination is bad. If black people do it, it's still bad. We need to have solidarity between us to not allow ourselves to fall victim to black tokenism, but also to personify the same oppressive traits that we claim to despise. We're not playing the oppression Olympics, man. We really all in this together. I'm not particularly sure how much I truly believe will be accomplished in the long run without this organization. And dare I say, I'm not particularly confident in the long-term viability of Black Lives Matter because of its very nature. I'm built to be blunt. Black Lives Matter, for all of its worth, feels like a slight regression in black liberation politics. And people might be mad at that, but I'll try to explain. The goal isn't clear enough, so it's just something really trendy to say. And if you don't believe me, why can Pokemon tweet it? Why can Legos tweet it? Because it isn't scary, it isn't radical, it isn't actually that profound. Nobody thinks, damn, it's gonna hurt my brand. They're thinking about moral currency and their next product, capitalizing on them, commercializing the movement to its eventual demise. I think at this point, the KKK could bust out with their verified Twitter account and be like, look man, we hate black people, but that was uncalled for. So we've donated $100, like, and people would buy it. People would be like, wow, man, but thank you. Even you've taken a stand, and people would stand there and clap. And it's because when you really boil it down, saying Black lives are important isn't actually saying a lot. It's why it's really easy to weed out racists, because it's such a basic, lukewarm take that anyone can say it. Well, regardless of where you stand, while it does bring attention to the issue at large, it doesn't plan accordingly on what we need to do about it. It's just something that's said. I'm not even exoticizing old black liberation movements either, as some of that stuff is dated and just wouldn't fly today. And it's much more about the general scope of what Black Lives Matter means. It's ironically too general for its own good, and as a result, says nothing about what needs to be done to systematically prevent this. But this video isn't about commercialization, so I'll wrap up. Solidarity between black people is essential. Not just because it's what they fear the most, but because genuinely the ability to have empathy for others is an important trait to have. And personally, and I'm just speaking for myself, I think it's what makes you human. It will never stop being fascinating to me, the sheer amount of people that look at the stuff going on in Venezuela, look at the stuff going on in the Middle East, hell, even me, look at the stuff going on in America, and people look at that and say, hey man, this has nothing to do with you, because it's only okay when the White House does it. Empathy is subject to how close people align to your race, religion, and reality, and I find that shit absolutely fascinating. We live in a world where the concept of death doesn't even feel real, because people are dying all the time. I won't tell you how you should feel, but I do know this. Apathy is a poison that serves no other purpose than defending the status quo. I won't tell you what you can do, but you can't do nothing.
Every gain in US history has been because oppressed people weren't afraid to fight. If we don't fight, we're saying it's okay for them to own everything.
The plug this week is actually not by a black artist. It's actually related to some of the things I discussed. It's a video game developed by a team based in Venezuela. Now, regardless of how you feel to Venezuela, to deny that people are suffering would be an understatement. So it's really weird to find out that while playing this game, it wasn't just a regular video game, but it was made from the perspective of people in Venezuela. It's actually quite interesting. It's very much cyberpunk and exploits many of the tropes. I'm pretty sure there's a character in this game that straight up looks like Akira, let me not lie. Everybody knows I like visual novels, so it was really interesting to see one made by the small indie team Soccer Band Games. It's an interesting critique of late capitalism with a bunch of interesting characters. One of my favourites being Dorothy for being a more positive depiction of a sex worker. I'm also big on Alma, but I'm not sure if that's how you say her name, I don't know. You mix drinks, you pay your rent, you play this bisexual girl dealing with a bad breakup. The characters are really fun, and being able to hear the voices of people from Venezuela, whether it's to satirize, parody, or just entertain, is always interesting. It also has a really great soundtrack. You can get on Steam, Switch, PlayStation 4, PS Vita, it's in a bunch of places. Again, none of this is sponsored, but show them love and support where you can. We might do something on a stream sometime soon. Maybe it'll be Danganronpa, who knows, no promises, but I'll probably announce something if we do. My heart goes out to everyone protesting. Be smart and be tactical, and take care of yourselves and take care of each other. We pray that tomorrow will be better than today. Power to the people. Peace.
It's much more than music, it's meaning, it's life set apart from the darkness, seeing the light, the flash and fashion and things in our eyes. So it seems in this life, these are things that we like. These are things that I write when I'm thinking about life. I think about the hype. It seems everything that they sing on the mic is always wrong. It doesn't need to be.